Welcome to another CPG webinar, a service of CPG Matters. I'm your host, John Karolewski. Thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about achieving the perfect store accurately and consistently. Joining me to explain how this is done are two executives from AFS Technologies, Joe Bellini, CEO, and Andres Jejen, Product Management Director. Now, this webinar is interactive. If you have questions, type them in the chat box in the lower left of your screen. Without further ado, here is Joe Bellini.
Well, thanks, John. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. What we'd like to cover today is, in our last session, I actually went through some detail on retail activity optimization and the perfect shelf, and talked about the what's and how's and the elements of a program. And so what I'll do is spend about the first 10 minutes giving a summary of what I discussed last time, because that is available in more detail. And then I'll hand it over to Andres, who will actually go into the mechanisms behind the technologies that are behind some of the new advancements in executing the perfect shelf, especially around digital and digital imaging. So we expect it to be a fruitful session, and hopefully you'll find some value in it that you'll be able to take back and implement in your own companies. So reestablishing perfect store execution. One of the things that we need to think about is, what are you actually able to do today? When you think about what's happening with your field sales or your field merchandising. And the bullet points here. The first one is an interesting one because the history of this particular class of software, if you think about Salesforce automation or mobility or retail execution, is it had its genesis really in the efficiency. So are we really being efficient in deploying our resources? Because we're looking at a fairly wide and varied network from a retail perspective or an operator perspective. And what we're starting to turn our heads toward now is what's the effectiveness of that? Because we've got a lot of data and information that's now available, along with technologies, really good mobile technologies, both online and offline, that give us the ability now to interact with the data in different ways and make it actionable. So, and also to measure, how we're doing out in the field. And so the effectiveness of what we're doing is now really at the forefront of what the next steps are, when we think about this whole class of solution and opportunity. So being able to define the KPIs, related to that effectiveness around improved productivity. Also structuring the shelf. As we look at the whole trade promotion side of things, we look at the assortment plans, we look at, the integrated business planning that takes place, the annual plans, a lot of the scenarios. In those scenarios, we're looking at, base and lift factors. We're looking at KPIs like, targeted revenue and margins per square foot. There's a lot of objective functions that get looked at in terms of, volumes versus market share and things like that. So, as you think about the planograms, you think about the assortments that are out there, you think about the realogram, what's really happening on the shelf versus the original planogram, that information is available to us now. And, we can balance that against what we're actually seeing in the store to optimize that from a data perspective. So that ties in nicely. And then just the task prioritization. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many, cycles we have just given the physical limitations to visit certain stores. So how are we, prioritizing tasks both in store and between stores, as well as the sequence of stores, and then, empowering the reps with actionable insights. There's a lot here, and it's not just the insights themselves, but be able to act on them. We just launched over, with a very large worldwide food manufacturer, the ability to do in-store deals. Not just for the rep to offer the deal, but actually have it on invoice. And all the clearing that goes on with that when you think about the financial system. So there's a lot that's available today related to this, and so that's what we mean by perfect store execution. The retail activity optimization related to that then is really a reflection, a mirror of what I just mentioned. So if you look at the quote on the bottom, as the market matures, the focus is really shifting to RAO, which does use advanced analytics to send the field sales force to the locations that will yield the greatest return on their time and efforts. And so it's the locations along with the activities related to that. So don't let, the advanced analytics, scare you in terms of, whether or not the field sales force can execute this. What's really important, with today's software is to be able to make, the actions intuitive. So, the analytics, the data, information, that kind of thing is going on in the background. I mean, we all know what's been happening, when you look at things like forecasting, there's a lot of time series and a lot of different statistical models that get used when you think about forecasting, but they all have a law of diminishing returns. At some point, you just can't model it in any more detail. I mean, even on your fast-moving consumer goods, you're going to hit a limit of 70 to 80% accuracy on what you're looking at for forecasting, and much less, with slower-moving goods. And so you're always going to have, issues related to what was originally forecast versus what's being consumed, and what do I do about it? So, just like in forecasting where, all that complex math and everything is really hidden, and you're really just looking at suggested purchase orders, same thing here. The math will be in the background, and the insights, the actionable insights will be intuitive as we're working through it. So looking at some of it, how do you actually achieve it? Looking at things like, increasing the sales team efficiency, focusing on high impact activities. And so, just basically deciding, which stores you want to visit, rather than have a fixed visit schedule. How often, thinking through, what is the sales potential, current share of shelf, depending on what the KPIs are, empowering the sales team and increasing that effectiveness. Also, increase their effectiveness by applying the correct in-store standards. Things like, the first bullet here, looking at like low out of stock. Now, I've spent a lot of time in the forecasting and supply chain world, and, I was implementing rapid delivery programs with major food retailers just over the last few years. And, there's demand sensing now where we can sense, within day shifts on the shelf, and we know how much backstore inventory we have for shelf replenishment and facing. And so these rapid delivery cycles, and it's integrated through the carriers, the transportation management systems, as well as what you're doing for flow casting in the warehouses, and what you're going to do with cross-docking and flow-throughs. So, the ability to manage the out-of-stocks in terms of rapid replenishment is there today. The supply chain systems, the visibility you have to inventory within the channel, both in store, at the distribution centers, depending on where you've decided binning locations. I mean, everything's available now. And so it is actionable. I mean, we can maintain the perfect shelf, and whether it's the original planogram, or whether there's been some SKU shifting related to the realogram or what the sell-in is at the store, those things can be managed today. So things like the shelf position, shelf share, the planogram compliance, the trade investments. We know that a forecast is wrong the second it's published. So there's going to be a lot of integrated business planning around trade, and there's going to be some scenario planning and annual plans and so forth. And, we're going to be looking at base and lift factors, and, that'll be the plan, but what gets executed is going to be different. But there's a lot of investment in those trade investments as you're going through those cycles. So trying to stay as close as possible and then evaluate what's actually occurring in the field so we can make in-field adjustments is really the key. So really balancing out what we're doing on the trade and what's actually executing in the field. And of course, setting those targets. So driven by analysis of data gathered in the field is really the key related to these KPIs. So, just visually looking at the perfect store, winning at the shelf. I mean, that's what it's all about. If I look at, everything we're doing in trade promotion management and trade promotion optimization, I'm looking at retail execution, I'm looking at the ability to execute digital imaging strategies in the store. I'm looking at what I'm doing on the supply chain from a rapid replenishment perspective, from, long-term inventory planning. And I've got all sorts of channels. I'm looking at omni-channels now in terms of how people purchase, where they purchase, where they return. I mean, there's a lot involved here. And so when we're looking at the perfect store, it's all focused on winning at the shelf. This is where the rubber hits the road. What's actually on the shelf, and am I satisfying all demand at the point of purchase? So looking at these trade promotions, what really should I be doing when I'm in the store? Can I execute on out of stock or low visibility to inventory positions? What's my product ranging as I'm looking at the SKUs and the sell-ins, the shelf positions. There's a lot of mechanisms involved in some of these trade promotions, empowering the rep, with the choices they have. This is all involved here, and we're at the linchpin of opportunity now, shifting in the market. Our ability now to get away from just the efficiency to the effectiveness, and the ability to harness the data and the linkages that we have through here is quite impressive. And it's easy to start. You put some basic KPIs in place. You make it intuitive, so it's not overwhelming for anybody. And then over time, it evolves. And you can even gamify it to a certain extent to make it fun and interesting for the field in terms of how they're executing and how well their perfect shelf is compared to somebody else's. Especially when you look at cross-product market share and things like that. So what is the perfect store? In order to win at the shelf, it's necessary to flexibly define, capture, and analyze the in-store standards. Not only be physically present at the correct store, but also be accompanied by their promotional activities and be displayed correctly. So this is, fairly straightforward, shelf, KPIs, display, execution, and then knowledge, information, having it in dashboard format so we can look at the KPIs. We understand what the exceptions are. We can make them actionable based on the controls we have. Having a full mobile framework, both in an attached mode and detached mode. Having the business analytics associated with that, being able to look at trending, looking at white spaces, looking at gaps. Those types of things are all part of what we want to see, make intuitive, and like I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to give the field sales force the ability to do deals and actually have them appear on the invoice in field, online, real time, that's there. They have the ability to do those things. So, as you think about these KPIs, maybe you haven't grappled with the effectiveness KPIs. Maybe you've done the efficiency, but what does it look like? What do you think about? Distribution rates of 90% for core brands, share shelf 60%, one incremental location achieved for every call cycle, of all of the initiatives that I have laid out achieved. Was the merchandising quality achieved? Basically over 90% of the listed products were audited. Field sales, I'm looking at distribution, share of shelf, planogram compliance, promotion compliance. All these things are things for you to think about. If you think about your KPI program and what you'd like to implement out in the field. So if you look at it as a basket, you've got a lot of things in the basket that you need to think about. You've got your price lists, your territories, your targets, hierarchies. You've got assortments, call types, promotions, surveys, et cetera, et cetera. And so, this is all about having a closed loop environment. So we can have our retail activity optimization, our perfect store scorecards, our field activities modified to support changing priorities, focusing on the activities, things like, a sudden drop in brand visibility. How do I react to that? What do I do about it? How do I coordinate that with back office priorities and assignments that I have so I can execute those properly in the field? And so it's a closed loop type thought process that we need to implement here, given all the variables we're working with, so that we can take full advantage of the levers that we have. Think about it as a series of levers that we now have control over, and being able to execute to the perfect store. So that we take full advantage of revenue and margin per square foot that's availed to us, and also maybe where some of the competition may fall down. How do we capitalize on those opportunities? So if there's a short-term promotion opportunity that just happens to appear because there was an issue at a dock, or something wasn't supplied properly for one of our competitors, gives us a short-term opportunity for a win from a market share perspective. So lots of activities happening there. And then on the benefit side, this is just a model. There's a lot of different things that you could put in here, but it's a way for you to think about. At the end of the day, I'm looking for improved earnings before interest and taxes. So basically improved margins. I can look at it from a gross margin perspective, which is more product related, and also from an efficiency impact overall from a cost perspective. And so, looking at costs, looking at increasing sales, there's models that can be put together. When you think about, well, how would I go about this? If I'm ready to take that next step, if I'm ready to move beyond just, straight, the efficiency and go to more effectiveness, how do I validate a business plan for that? How do I justify an internal rate of return of 12 or 14%, depending on what your internal company hurdle rate is? This gives you the ability, these models, to go in and say, yeah, here it is. Here's what we can expect both top line and bottom line from implementing these kinds of programs. And this is why analytics is important. I think, generally the market is now in tune with business intelligence and analytics. I mean, there's nothing a company hates more than having an asset and not being able to leverage that asset to the benefit of their shareholders, whether they're public or private. And data is that. I mean, there's data available now that is an asset to the company that's not being properly leveraged. And so these systems, these applications give you the ability to take an asset you already own and use it to the benefit of yourselves and your shareholders in order to create a better result. And that's what the benefit piece is all about. So I'm going to do, now that I've revisited what I talked about last time at a high level summary level, is hand it over to Andres so he can talk more about some of these mechanisms from a digital perspective and what the futures are related to that area of the business. Andres?
Thank you, Joe. So let's speak a little bit about the store visit exercise and the store audit exercise as such. With most of the traditional retail execution measurement techniques, a big portion of the time of the sales rep or the merchandiser is spent on capturing data, right? That means that the user has to perform physical counts of the facings in the shelf, reviewing the assortment, the distribution, validating the execution of additional exhibitions in the store, and in general, reviewing all the conditions that are part of the rules defined by each company, right? But basically, there are three components that are somewhat left behind in this process. Planning the activities that should happen in the store, executing the required actions based on what has been detected, and performing an analysis to determine what will be the next step for further visits. So let's explore these three components. For the first one, a big part of the exercise of the retail activity optimization is not only related to to visit the appropriate stores, right? But also is related to determine what will be the right activities to execute in that store. This planning exercise can be oriented by a combination of availability of data from diverse sources, such as previous exercises or previous audits, hard data from external providers, right, such as Nielsen or IRI or NeoGrid. Multiple providers provide this information, and also involves a careful activity guide related to the strategy devised by the company. Now, only a few companies have strong strategies in terms of pre-call planning, and even fewer give proper guidance to the field reps on how to perform the pre-call exercise. The next component is related to execute the actions in the store. Since the largest portion of the visit is spent actually capturing data, there is very little room to execute the corrective actions. And moreover, the data capture itself doesn't tell the story on what needs to be corrected or changed in the shelf in order to bring the store to the perfect store level. Hence, corrective actions are often taken too late or when their impact is not as significant as it should be. Finally, you have the component related to the post-call review, in which the field users are intended to gather conclusions out of the visit, and then they should establish what will be the action plan for the following visit. However, since the data itself doesn't really tell a story, the user is not in a position to accurately determine what actions should occur in the next visit and what will be the impact of those actions over detected exceptions. So, based in our experience, we have seen a few challenges that are common to all companies. Each company on itself has its own rules, even rules that will apply at the retailer level itself, to determine what will be the common exceptions related to the distribution. Given this, each user will have its own opinion on what one can be classified as an exception and how to resolve it. At the same level, each brand will have different ways to determine what is a facing, right? So you will have stacked boxes, or one front, or 4 sides, or 2 stacks, or whatever, right? And how to use the information of the facings to calculate the share of sale. If it's going to be linear, if it's going to be by physical count, etc., right? In the current models of the retail execution, even if the rules are enforced by the company, each user may have its own way to interpret them. Hence, the consistency of the data seems to be compromised. Another challenge is related to the time spent in gathering information from the stores. Counting facings from multiple locations can represent a significant amount of effort, and this again reduces the opportunity of executing corrective actions in an effective way. Finally, this is not only a matter of capturing data. It is also knowing what to do with the data that is captured. The users, in an ideal scenario, should be able to identify what are the exceptions and to determine how to react when an exception is reached. So in the current solutions of merchandising, data is collected spending, again, a significant amount of time, and the final result at the eyes of the user is that you get a lot of good results and the exceptions are drowned inside of them, right? So the exceptions are not easily visible and obviously cannot be immediately corrected. On the other hand, the captured data is only metrics. It doesn't provide KPIs that can be used for further calculation. Since the calculation of the KPI doesn't occur in real time, target accomplishment is only evaluated much after the actual execution is completed. Hence, the user will not know how close or far from target he is, right? In summary, the execution of these actions is in reality disconnected from the data collection. Hence, it's very delayed and valuable time is lost trying to analyze and interpret the results. So what we're trying to achieve here is an ideal scenario, and this ideal scenario consists in 5 basic steps. The first step is collecting the data, yes, because it's absolutely necessary to collect the data, but in this case, we want to be more effective in terms of time spent capturing this data. This includes the usage of next-generation digital message recognition tools, to which I will refer to this presentation. The next step consists in evaluating the data using to obtain key performance indicators, KPIs, right? So if you think of it, the number of facings of a product will not tell us in reality too much unless we take that number and compare it against the ideal levels dictated by our perfect store parameters and whatever, obviously, what has been negotiated with the retailer. After the KPIs are established and reviewed, our next step consists in compare those KPIs against the pre-established targets by the company to determine if the performance is on, above, or below the acceptable level. In that way, the field user should be able to clearly visualize the comparison and proceed to the next step in which the exceptions are clearly visible, right? Once of the exceptions are visualized, and depending on the level of each exception, the user should be able to determine what will be the actions that are our final step. And the actions can consist on something that you can do in the existing visit or something that you can plan as a part of the next visit. So once you perform the data collection in a more efficient way, you will see that the time for data capture is reduced significantly. So addressing this issue about speed and accuracy will give you up to 60% of more time in your visit, right? And you will see based on this chart that the time for actions and corrections is greatly increased, right? And executing actions within the same visit has an enormous benefit to companies since the shelf is maintaining top conditions constantly. So this is what Joe mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, moving from efficiency to effectiveness, right? Moving from doing things to doing things right. Now, let me show you a few screens of what is contained in AFS solutions in terms of digital image recognition. We are creating some guided steps for the visit. It's something that we call a visit script per activity type, in which we are including one step for audit photos. Once the user reaches the part of the audit photos that is present in this part of the screen, the user will be taken to a section in which the different scene types will be selected. And a scene type is basically a specific location in the store in which some rules are to be followed. So imagine that you have your main shelf as a scene, or a cooler as a scene, or an additional exhibition as a scene, and so on. So you enter into that particular scene, and the system will show you a screen in which you will be able to capture the images for your particular shelf. And this is the interesting part of this. So instead of going from shelf to shelf, counting manually your facings and your competitor facings, you will be in a position in which you will capture several photos of the shelf that will be stitched together, and then you will get out the results of that content. So imagine how much time is reduced by capturing the images of the shelf. In a typical major supermarket, our trends indicate that a single category can be covered with up to 10 photos. 10 photos in reality is not a huge amount of time, or won't represent a huge amount of time. After the images are captured, they are sent to be processed by our algorithms and our systems in the back end, right? But this is not restricted for other actions to occur in the system, right? So while the information is being processed by the server, the user can operate or act in other different areas of their solution. So basically, you can start placing an order, or you can audit a different shelf, or you can proceed and review promotional compliance. All the available actions in the system can be executed while the original shelf is being analyzed. once the results come back to the system. And this is actually another of the nice features about this digital image recognition piece. The results are coming almost in real time to the device. And I say I say almost in real time because there are some limitations related to technology and communications that will not allow us to get the results immediately, or they come in a very decent time, so the user will be able to get the information in its hand as soon as possible. This is a view on how the results will be returned to the user, so you will be able to see that the information is segregated and discriminated per category, per product group, per brand, right? And you will be able to see and identify trends. And this is another part of our discussion that I want to bring to your attention. It's not only showing how many facings do you have, it's to show how is the trend, how were the results in the previous visit. Am I increasing my number of facings or not? Am I on acceptable levels of performance or not? So the user doesn't really get drawn into the good results. Actually, the exceptions are clearly identified and visible in the system. And not only that, after the exceptions are detected, the user can trigger actions directly from those exceptions. So you see in this example that I pointed out here, you have an out of stock. And from the out of stock information, you will be able to create an objective or to send a message to a leader or to send an email or create a customized action, right? You will be able also to determine what other stock actions were executed. So talk to a store manager or talk to a sales manager or bring product from the stock. All of these actions can be reported in a way captured by the system. So you will be able to see what are the actions executed by the merchandiser or the user. In addition to that, the user will get some screens in which the analysis of this information can be performed. So remember that it's not only about capturing the data, it's about knowing what to do with the data. So if you see the information, you will see that we have a section for exceptions and a section for the trends of the individual KPI related to the shelf. Now, if I go back to a previous comment in which I said that the results are the savings in time are up to a 60% in terms of the data capture. Imagine what kind of activities can you do with that time available. So most of our customers that have implemented this technology, the first thing that they notice is that they can increase their coverage with the same resources. And why is that? Because they have more time available. The time in store is reduced, so they are able to squeeze in more stores in the same day for the same user. So that's huge. Imagine that you can at least add 1 or 2 more stores to your day visit. Another great benefit related to the time is to get the actionable results in the hands of the user and also in the hands of the company. So imagine that you don't have to consolidate at the end of the day your results. Imagine that after the visit is finished, you get the same photo that the user is seeing, and you will get to see the conditions of the store immediately. Also, since you have more time, you will be able to drive new opportunities, right, and drive new business to the retailers. And also, since you have the data and the time in your hands, you will be able to plan more effectively. But this is not only about time. There are also some benefits related to the digital image recognition technology. The first one is consistency. Obviously, you see that a photo will never lie to you. The photo tells you exactly what you see. And the photo obviously will provide the same result, right? It's not subject to interpretation, it's not subject to modification. The photo stays as it is, as it was captured. The second benefit is related to accuracy. So you will see that there is a reduction on counting errors. So if for some reason a person doesn't count the facings properly or doesn't count or doesn't measure the linear space properly, the photo will increase that kind of accuracy, right? And that the rules that I mentioned in a previous slide are always considered and interpreted the same way. So there is no room for the user saying that the facings are not 2 stacks but 3 stacks, or the facings are 4 sides of the product. The rule will be enforced the same way all the time. The additional feature and the additional benefit related to this is about intelligence. It's basically to be able to identify opportunities from competitors. And some organizations are not or don't have the manpower or the time to capture or gather intelligence from competitors. from the digital image recognition, you will be able to see what competitor products are in the store, and from there gather intelligence about what are their activities, what is their share of shelf, and what are their strategies. Now let's speak a little bit about how this technology works. So as you can see, we have in the screen an image of a typical product, right? But the product in itself is not what the system detects. The system detects small patterns in the product that will make it easy to identify that the product is the same, even if the packaging is slightly changed. So the first pattern is related to the color, and it's not the exact color that has to be detected all the time, because you have a dependency on your device when you capture your photo in terms of the quality of the color. So the system is smart enough to identify and interpret any changes on the color histogram of the product. Of course, there is the logo, but the system doesn't understand that the logo, or doesn't consider that the logo has to be in the same position all the time. If the logo is found in different places of the product, the system is able to identify it and interpret it as the product that contains it. There are also some graphical details, right, that will enable the system to identify easily and properly what kind of product this is. Now, the system algorithms are designed to overcome several negative factors that will have impact in the photo capture process, such as bad photo angles, and you know that when you are facing a shelf, it's not always easy to be capturing the shelf from an exact angle in the front, right? Sometimes you have to tilt your camera, sometimes you have to take the photo from the side and stuff like that. So the system is able to overcome these bad photo angles. The other part is related to be able to overcome multiple facings and angles. So if the product is not properly set as front, or is leaning a little bit, or is stacked sideways or stuff like that, the system is able to determine accurately which product is being audited. An additional topic is related to partial view obstructions, and this is very common when you have cross-merchandising, right? When you have points of interruption in the shelf that will not allow you to capture the product completely, so the system is able to identify a product even from a partial photo. And finally, there is the topic related to color distortions that I already mentioned, related to the color histogram of the product. Now, as a company, we have identified a various set of business cases that can be covered through digital image recognition. I want to point out only a few of them to let you know that some of these business cases are already available in our system. Some others will be available in future phases because this technology is live and is evolving constantly. So you will be able to perform digital monitoring for out of stocks, digital monitoring for share of shelf, digital monitoring for number of facings, digital monitoring for distribution, shelf price recognition, planogram compliance, entry versus exit audits, competitor insights, heat maps, scale targets, and discovery and support with AFS data discovery, which is our next generation of data analysis and data information analysis. So this is what is related to the business cases, and I believe we are now in time for questions. So if you have any additional comments or questions, we'll be happy to respond.
Sure, Andres. One question came in for you during your segment of the presentation. It referred to slide number 23, results, exceptions, and actions. And the question was, how did you get the data for your graph? That's slide 23.
Let me just go back to the referred slide. Slide 23, right?
Yes. Right there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a very good question, and then let me just step one slide back because actually everything comes from slide number 21. So after you have captured your images, right, and the images travel to the cloud, right, you will get as a result this, which is the image that is in the left part of the screen, which is basically the physical count of the facings of the products or the share of shelf or the product existence, right? So this part of the screen is the result of the actual digital image recognition. But it's not only about digital image recognition. We have also the possibility of capturing this information manually because we know that not in all scenarios it is possible to take a photo, right? But to respond accurately to the question, is yes, this information comes from the actual store audit exercise in the specific scene.
Okay, and following up on that, another question, how long does it take to return the result after a picture is taken?
Okay, so there is a number of dependencies for that, and we have seen various types of scenarios in which the photo is processed in a very decent time. Our top length of time in terms of processing is 20 minutes, but that is in a very exceptional scenario. Typically, it doesn't take more than 3 to 5 minutes to come back.
Okay, and following up still, some retailers do not allow photos to be taken in store of their shelves. Does the software allow manual updates as well, or strictly photos?
That's a very good question. We are very aware of that, and we know that there are some retailers that carry restrictions to capture photos of the shelf, or there will be some scenarios in which the technology is not well adopted or well accepted by the end user. So we still offer the possibility of doing the same exercise with manual captures. So instead of having a photo that is being interpreted, the user will have the possibility to key in the facings, the share of shelf, and so on, right? But the way we do it in our system increases also the efficiency of the user, because we do it in a way that the products are easily identified and searched, and the capture can be done imagine that you have a clipboard in your hands, is something very similar to that.
Okay, another attendee question, the required megapixel of the photo.
That's another interesting technical question, and in reality, there is no minimum requirement for megapixels in the photo. There is a rule of thumb actually, and is the following: if you are able to tell what products are available in the shelf by looking at the photo as a user, as yourself, if you take that photo in your device and you see it and you are able to see the products and tell each one of them, then the system will do the same. And actually, our system performs a transformation process regardless of the photo being taken at 6 megapixels or 12 megapixels. The system compresses those photos into an acceptable size in a way that the transmission of such photos doesn't consume bandwidth for the user, and the time of processing is reduced.
Okay, another one, beyond the shelf, can this software analyze the picture of display? How many SKUs on the display? How many cases of a display?
Okay, and that is an excellent question. There are limitations of the technology. Of course, it won't tell you how deep is your shelf and how many cases you have in the depth of your shelf, because the photo itself won't be able to tell that. But the location itself is not relevant. You can measure different types of exhibitions, and you will be able to tell down to the level of the SKU how many pieces or cases or units you have, how many items are there, not only for your products but also for your competitors.
Okay, another one. Can the technology distinguish between subtle packaging variations of the same product?
That is a very good question as well. Imagine the typical case of the Coca-Cola products in which the packaging changes depending on the season. And remember that the algorithm doesn't detect the product per se, the presentation per se. It detects specific aspects of the product that will allow to identify it. So it will be the logo, the color pattern, certain design elements such as that beautiful twist that Coca-Cola has. So yes, it definitely detects variations of the packaging.
Okay. Are there any categories of products or retail channels that aren't a good fit for retail execution with this image recognition technology? For example, products with reflective packaging, etc.
Well, reflective packaging itself is not a problem, since the system is able to detect partial packages or partial part of the product to determine what SKU is, right? So in reality, we have yet to experience any issues across a wide variety of product categories and retail formats. So we have successfully deployed this technology in both developed and emerging markets without an issue.
Okay. Is the system comparing against an established planogram that is stored on the servers that are running the algorithm?
That is an excellent question. If I refer to my slide number 28, let me just go back to that one. We have a business case detected related to planogram compliance. That is something that will come as an evolution of the system. Right now, the system provides you something that is called the realogram, which is basically the distribution and the brand map on the shelf, right? But a natural evolution will be to be able to compare that realogram versus the planogram and determine the level of compliance of the model.
Okay. Wouldn't the image recognition technology require a significant investment in time, et cetera, up front? What is the typical time to value?
Well, since it's a technology that is really mature, the investment in time for implementation is very low. And in reality, what is required to set up this kind of technology is part of whatever you will do to deploy a retail execution solution. So it's part of setting up proper master data to gather product images and stuff like that, right? So in reality, setting this up is not a complex process. And also imagine the value that provides the saving of time, right? And the ability to increase your coverage, right? So the time of value is in reality very short. There is not an exact rule or an accurate rule in terms of time that can tell you, okay, you will get your investment back in X months. That depends a lot on the type of business that you're running. But I can tell you based on our experience that the return of investment is in a very short time.
Okay. It was interesting seeing how the image recognition will work. Based on the example you showed, how challenging is it to configure the system for the in-field sales rep?
Oh, okay. That's an awesome question because this is part of our day-to-day experience with the implementation team. And it relates a lot to be able to, first of all, gather information about your products and your competitor products if you want to audit them. Gather all of those key elements that the system should be able to interpret and recognize. Set up the rules for the things that you want to measure. So how is a facing determined? What will be your rules for share of shelf, against which products you will measure share of shelf. But if you think of it, those are the same rules that you will set up when you deploy a typical retail execution solution. So in reality, implementing digital image recognition will not add any complexity to your typical retail execution deployment.
Okay, one more. Of all the business cases you covered, which one tends to have the biggest impact in terms of helping the sales rep be more efficient?
Well, there's a number of those, but I can tell you from the top of my head that being able to measure out of stocks and share of shelf, those are the ones that provide immediate value to the companies because this will allow you to react immediately and correct the immediate exceptions, right? So you will be able to see if the shelf is in the conditions that have been negotiated with the retailer, and if you have any product without the stock, you should be able to replenish it immediately or place an order to be replenished immediately.
Okay, one more that just came in. What are the hardware requirements to run this application? Can it be loaded on any Apple or Android photo capability device?
All right, that's a very common question. In terms of hardware requirements, our system doesn't require too many processing power because the photo itself is not analyzed on the device. The photo is sent to our servers, and the whole magic happens on our servers, right? So it's not really necessary to have a very powerful device, right? It runs right now, as of right now, on Android devices, both tablet and smartphone, and future versions will run on Apple devices, both iPhone and iPad.
Okay, that's all the questions that came in, Andres and Joe, and certainly by the number of questions, it demonstrated a high degree of curiosity and interest in your presentation and the technology. So for more information, on the screen right now, we have the contact phone numbers and emails for Joe Bellini and Andres Jejen. You can contact them directly at this email or phone. And earlier we had the ability to download a white paper, and there it is on the screen again, a white paper for download about helping your field force achieve the perfect store, accelerating retail activity. And certainly at any time you can go to the AFS website at afsi.com. So I thank you for attending. Thank the presenters again. It's been an excellent presentation. Again, a high level of interest in this technology. Thank you for AFS Technologies and CPG Matters. Until the next time.